A new owner is coming to Phoenix. NBA trade season is here, and yet Suns fans are getting antsy. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll talk about what faces the franchise going forward and James Jones' role in all of it. What's fair to pin on him, what's not, and what does he need to do going forward? On today's episode, let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Friday. Holiday weekend ahead of us. I hope you are ready for some good basketball, though. Memphis, Denver, Memphis again, new ownership, all of this Suns news, and you chose to be here, so I thank you, and I ask you to do it again. Hit subscribe, hit follow. Come along for the ride. We're on every single platform wherever you are. We are, and we're here for you every single day of the week. You can also follow along at Locked On PHX Suns on Twitter to come along that way as well. Get updated when new shows go live. Have a little bit of fun talking Suns. I want to get through this James Jones conversation in a very fair and balanced way, all right? Because it's not going away. I've tried to keep an eye on YouTube comments, Twitter, Suns subreddit, all these different places to be fair about this, because I don't want it to be that my opinion, my belief in James Jones is the only thing that comes through on this show, all right? I hear you guys about a lot of the frustration and criticism, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all year long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll get to the latest Suns trade news, as well as a little bit of a preview of these upcoming Grizzlies games on Saturday and Tuesday, or Friday and Tuesday. But let's start with James Jones, as I said. And I want to just, again, level set here. What's realistic and reasonable to pin on James Jones and what is not, okay? And so let's start here. Let's start with the things that are fair to put on him. Or let's start with what's true no matter who the GM is. Devin Booker is a franchise cornerstone player, all right? He's somebody where if you have him on your team, you are set up for success. You're going to pin your hopes to him. You're going to build around him 99 out of 100 times. He's proven that. He's excellent. He's doing everything this team needs to be. But there's players better than him in the NBA. Is that fair to say as well? I feel like it is. Okay, like there's one version of looking at that frustration of of Game 7 and the second round exit that the Suns just went through, where you say the Suns came up against a team in the Bucks that had Giannis Antetokounmpo, better than Devin Booker, and Luka Doncic, who I think it'd be tough to argue is not also better than Devin Booker, all right? You look all around the league. He is firmly in that upper echelon of players, but he's not in the top 10. He's not in the top 5. He's not anybody's number 1. And so that's just a fact of life if you are the general manager of this team and trying to build this team. Okay, and that's not criticism to him. He is a guy who scored 40 points twice in the finals. He is a guy who had a triple-double closeout against the Lakers. He had a triple-double game against the Clippers in the conference finals. He has piled up points. He's on these lists with only Melo and Kobe and LeBron and, Tracy McGrady in terms of scoring at his age. He's on his way to potentially being a Hall of Fame player. He was first-team All-NBA. I'm not taking anything away from Devin Booker, but the fact is you only have what you have. And James Jones does not have Giannis or whoever you want to pick, wherever you rank all these guys. James Jones has somebody between like 8 and 15, not somebody between 1 and 7. The other fact of the matter is Chris Paul's 37 and health and consistency are becoming a problem, right? And so with those two as the offensive engines of this team, the Suns' championship chances are going to be based on the roster being better than the sum of its parts. They're going to be based on, the success of this team is going to be based on finding role players, finding a system, finding a coach that can put everything together and get it to rise above what it is. All right. And so what can be blamed on James Jones, okay? What's realistic with all that said that you can actually put on him? And then I'll tell you why I have a problem with the people who put all of it on him. But there are a few things I feel like are totally fair to drop in James Jones's lap. All right. One, he's really ignored the draft in a problematic way, a way that has set the Suns up where they don't have a lot of young talent right now, a lot of young talent who hasn't been paid yet, or who, a young role player who maybe can continue to get better. They have a lot of guys in their prime who are already paid or about to be paid, and I've criticized him that every step of the way. I think along with that, you could criticize James Jones for ignoring young sort of project players, like up until this year. I think he has Josh Okogie now. He has Dwayne Washington. Those are the types of players that I've been advocating for Jones to pursue and try to build up for a long time. He hasn't really done that, and so that's another way that they get into this space. And then I think his default is going to be continuity and patience, right? And it's fine to disagree with him on that. I certainly don't always agree that that's the best way to go, and I think Jones can fairly be criticized for that, all right? Here's two things I don't think can be blamed on him, all right? Not trying to upgrade the roster. That's something that I see all the time. James Jones is asleep at the wheel. James Jones has just sat there and watched the team crumble and fail, and he's not doing anything to improve the situation, all right? That's not true. It's just not true. After the finals, you can disagree with what happened, but Jones traded for Landry Shamet, and he gave up a first-round pick to do it, and that trade was totally defensible. I would even say I personally thought it was a good trade. I think there were other people, if you read the stuff at the time, who agreed with me. It's not like it was an out-of-the-park home run, but it was certainly not crazy. It was a good move for what the Suns needed, which was more ball handling, more floor spacing, somebody else who could have the ball in his hands when the defense keyed in on Booker and Paul and do something with it. He hasn't lived up to that, but he was brought in to be an option, and that was defensible when it happened. In 2022, after the Mavs loss, James Jones was certainly 100%. We know for a fact he was in the mix for Kevin Durant throughout the summer. And you're seeing other teams also struggle as a result of not getting it done with KD. Now, maybe they should have offered more, or you think they should have bailed on the KD thing when it became obvious that they weren't going to get him. We can bicker about that. We don't know a lot of the details, but you see Miami having the same struggles this year, where they didn't get to do a lot of other stuff this summer after a disappointing end to their season as well, because they were also in the mix for Durant, and then with them, I think even Donovan Mitchell. James Jones' plan has been to build around Booker, McHale, DeAndre Ayton, and Cam Johnson, and be opportunistic if there are chances to upgrade beyond that. He looked at a 64-win team after last season, and aside from Durant, he didn't think a major move needed to be made. I don't think that that's unrealistic or ridiculous. What would you have done something different if you were running a 64-win team? Would you have had a franchise best regular season last year and then bailed on all the pieces that got you there because of how the Mavs series ended? If you say yes, okay. I guess I can't argue with you completely there, but a young team that's going to continue to get better won 64 games and ran into a bizarre, awful, disappointing, humiliating Game 7. James Jones decided, I will pursue Kevin Durant, and if I have a chance to bring in a franchise-altering talent like that, I will do it. Other than that, I'm going to keep on the same trajectory. I think the other thing that I see James Jones get blamed for that I think is a little bit ridiculous is not valuing offense enough. All right, Jay Crowder is home in Atlanta right now because James Jones made the choice to elevate Cam Johnson to this starting lineup, which is inherently trading defense for offense. When Chris Paul was there, out there to be got, James Jones went and got him to upgrade what the offense was going to be. Wasn't a defensive move. Even Ricky Rubio in his 30s was probably a better defender than Chris Paul in his late 30s, and it re-established the Suns as we're going to beat you by relentlessly executing our offense and scoring at a level with Paul's distribution and creation and Booker's same, that's going to beat you. That's what that trade was, I don't think that it's reasonable to say that James Jones doesn't have a plan, that he's not going out and pursuing the right types of things. You can criticize the moves that have been made, the choices that have been made, the decisions that he's made, but there is an insane amount of criticism that I see that is just James Jones is not trying. He's not making an effort. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand what's wrong with this team. That's crazy. What I also want to say is, if you look at the recent history of the NBA, a lot of teams have followed this same trajectory. It's hard to build once your team is already expensive and already very good. It's hard to make the decisions of, should we trade players who got us here to get even a little bit better? Should we, upgrade this one spot when this guy's already pretty good, In 2019 and 2020, the Bucks led the East. They ultimately, we know, flamed out in the playoffs. The only deadline deal they made or offseason deal they made through all of that time was getting George Hill at the 2019 trade deadline. Then eventually they finally go get Drew Holiday in the 2020 offseason to really upgrade themselves, but that was after 2 years of not much action at all. The Heat, they make the finals in 2020. They basically make no major additions after that, and they go get Victor Oladipo in 2021. That's not much. Then they finally signed Kyle Lowry in the 2021 offseason after getting swept by the Bucks in that year's playoffs. The Utah Jazz made a, Game 7 of the second round and lost to the Clippers in 2021. They made no major changes besides signing Rudy Gay and dumping Joe Ingles. Now, they obviously ended up taking a significant step back, but they were in the same spot. The Dallas Mavericks, they make the Western Conference Finals after they beat the Suns this year. What do? They let Jalen Brunson walk, and then their only real move was to trade for Christian Wood. All right? This stuff is hard. You play the hand you're dealt, but you can't just snap your fingers and plug all the holes in your team. Only one team wins every year. You have your players. You try to make deals to make the roster around them better. That's all you can do. That's all James Jones can do. And I don't get the criticism of they should be able to just suddenly be competitive with Boston or Milwaukee on one trade. You know what? Jason Tatum has done more in his career and is a more proven two-way player, I think, than Devin Booker. Maybe you could probably go either way. I'm not saying I would always take Booker, but he is at being as tall as he is, being as great of a defender as he is, and the improvements he's made on offense, an easier player to build around. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the same way. Steph Curry is the same way. There's a reason that those teams are ahead of where the Suns are, and it's because they have great players, and they've built over time, chipping away, and they finally broke through. That's what this is about. This is not yell at your general manager because you wish your team was better. That's not how this works, all right? It's not how this works. We heard another Jay Crowder rumor, the latest, and a new name from the Washington Wizards coming out. We'll get into that in just a second. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis all year long. Whether it is football, basketball, club soccer is back in all of our lives, heading toward a big Boxing Day in the Premier League, whatever you love, BetOnline has odds for you. If you love sports podcasts to inform your betting, you can find those at BetOnline as well. There are Christmas Day odds for the NBA. The Suns are 3-point underdogs on the road at 8:30 p.m. on Christmas. That's a fun one. I really hope we see Devin Booker. We'll see, though. Either way, get a little money on it. Make your Christmas maybe that much better. Head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Rui Hachimura was the latest guy to be apparently discussed by the Phoenix Suns. That report coming via Mark Stein. The Suns reportedly declined an offer for Crowder that would have been centered around Rui Hachimura. So I think it makes sense. Like this is a name that we hadn't necessarily heard out there, but anyone who had done some poking around, okay, what's an Eastern Conference team that maybe would benefit from getting Crowder? We've talked about the Wizards before in other packages, and Rui was, the type of young forward that you could see coming up in a conversation with the Suns. My take on this, though, is one, the money doesn't fully add up. We know the Suns have been interested in Kuzma in the past, and this particular trade, the salaries don't line up. So what do I think? I feel like we could have been hearing about this as potentially part of the negotiations related to Kuzma. Maybe it's a lowball offer. The Suns came to Washington and said, hey, we want Kuzma. Maybe the Wizards came back and said, all right, we want Crowder, but you're going to take Rui instead. And the Suns laughed in their faces, right? It could also just be old or outdated news. Maybe this was something that got talked about a while back, and then maybe that's what led to the Kuzma talks. Maybe it was the other direction. We don't fully know. But either way, I feel like the Suns were right to say no in this case. They were right to laugh in their faces if that's actually what they did. Probably not. But Rui has been better than expected in the league. I was covering the draft really closely when Hachimura came out of Tennessee Gonzaga, and I covered him in person. I watched Gonzaga, Tennessee in Phoenix that year, so I got to see him. I was watching his games closely. I was really, really low. I think he's exceeded expectations, but that all said, he's struggled to stay on the court or make a big impact defensively, and that the defense was always a big question with him, and he's not going to be much of a three-point shooter. At least he hasn't proven that yet. So you're looking at like one of these guys who doesn't have a clear role in the league, right? That's not what you need if you're trying to win a championship this year, and the Crowder trade is supposed to help you get there. That's my thoughts on the trade, but I also feel like it tells us something, and so I want to get to that as well. One is, at the very base level, at least there's still interest in Crowder, right? Like there's been another thing that I've seen Suns fans getting a little bit frustrated by that I've heard is they're not going to be able to find a trade for Crowder. That goes into the James Jones thing we were just talking about. He waited too long. He's butchering this. He's whatever. I'm not going to do any of that until we are at 3:01 Eastern time, the day of the trade deadline in February. All right. I'm not going to sit here and get mad about what might be because we just don't know. This is good evidence, though, that aside from the normal suspects that we've heard with Milwaukee and Miami and even Atlanta, that there is still interest out there, that the Suns are having active conversations and the league is not just, letting them hold out and wait it out. They're still talking. They still want Crowder. All right. The other good part of this is Rui is better than guys like Kobe White or Justin Holiday, who we had kind of wondered about when it came to Crowder deals. Like Hachimura is a little bit, he's the wrong type of player for what the Suns need, just because he's a little bit unproven still, and he's not like a ready-made role player, but he's, at a position of value in the league at the forward spot, and he's somebody who can create his own shot, who does have a pathway to continuing to get better, and that's a good player to be out there because it shows us that the market is still pretty strong. It's not just that there's interest, but the interest is legitimate. You're seeing deals that the Suns would probably enjoy hearing. Last but not least, I think this tells us the fact that they said no, that they're still holding out for better opportunities and bigger trades. All right. And that's not a surprise to anybody necessarily. That's why there hasn't been a trade yet. But that tells me James Jones still believes that there's a better trade out there. Otherwise, you would say yes to this one. So again, we have a little less than 2 months to go on this. I believe the deadline is February 9th or February 10th or something like that. It remains to be seen what the deal ends up being, how much more talk there is between now and then, but I'm not worried about this trade. I'm not upset that the Suns said no. If I'm a Suns fan, I think more of the same. Keep it rolling. The Suns play the Grizzlies 2 times in the next 4 days, so I want to break down that matchup a little bit, starting with Friday, which is a game I will be at heading into the weekend. How do those teams match up? Will the Suns win on Friday? We'll talk about that in just a second. First, today's show brought to you by the NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think a law enforcement officer wouldn't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, trust me, you're not. Because the bottom line is if you feel different, you drive different, and driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by the NHTSA. Today's show also brought to you by My Solar Nerd. If you live in a sunny state like ours, you've likely had a time or two where somebody comes up to your door trying to sell you what they call is free solar. But we know, you know, it's misleading. They're just trying to overcharge you. But My Solar Nerd, their mission is simple. Help you get the best solar system to fit your needs. The guys at mysolarnerd.com are truly locals, and they understand the nuances of going solar in Arizona. They also believe an educated customer is a happy customer, and that switching to solar should mean saving you money. So once you're ready, they'll put their industry knowledge to work for you by choosing the best equipment, warranties, and installers in their network. They'll also help you figure out all the incentives and credits you may qualify for on the back end to make sure your transition is as smooth as possible. Our listeners will get a $50 Amazon gift card when you book a no-commitment evaluation. This promotion only for Locked On listeners who are local and only for homeowners. So visit mysolarnerd.com and select Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section and make the switch to solar on your terms. Start your research process today by visiting mysolarnerd.com and show Locked On some love by letting them know we sent you. Folks, going solar doesn't need to be complicated, and mysolarnerd.com makes it easy. All right, so let us get through here with a little bit of some thoughts on this Grizzlies game, all right? Because they play Memphis on Friday night at home, nationally televised game. We just did hear right before I hit record on this, Devin Booker will not play in that game. He has already been deemed out. Josh Okogie is questionable. Jock Landale is questionable. So those are both positive signs, but this team is still going through it when it comes to health. That said, Tuesday's matchup could be a little bit more competitive. We don't know that yet. And there's still plenty of reason to be excited about this matchup, all right? So what I tend to do with these matchups back when I was writing at Bright Side of the Sun and I would preview these games or whatever it might have been, I would go advantage by advantage, all right? What are the Suns' advantages? What are the Grizzlies' advantages? So let's just hit it that way, all right? So I'll start with the Suns. We'll do the good news first, all right? I actually think there are more of them, but I also kind of had to get creative. I think the Grizzlies' advantages, I only have 3 listed here, but they're kind of big ones. But let's hit the Suns first. I think there's an opportunity for them to hit the offensive glass, especially when Adams is off the floor. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a monster rebounder. He never really has been dating back to college. So when he's at center, when they have Brandon Clark in the game at center, they're a little bit small. Their defensive rebounding rate is not terrible, but not elite by any means. So I think the Suns with Torrey Craig, Josh Okogie if he plays, some of those guys would do. DeAndre Ayton do have a chance to hit the offensive glass and get some second chance points. I think they have an advantage when it comes to shooting. The Grizzlies have never been a really, really good three-point shooting team during the past few years when they've been in the playoffs with Ja. They have a great pick-and-roll creator to spray out to shooters, but they really don't have those amazing knockdown guys, especially with Desmond Bane out, okay? And so the Suns, with Chris Paul, can get hot. You know, if Mikal has a strong shooting night, if Damian Lee or Landry Shamet are able to get some to go in, I think the Suns could be, in a good spot. The Grizzlies' PNR pick-and-roll defense, it's designed to have Steven Adams drop, all right? So they're a drop team. He doesn't go super deep like maybe Yusuf Nurkic does or, JaVale McGee does, but he's going to drop into the paint to protect the rim, And the perimeter defender in that situation is going to go over the screen. So maybe that's Ja, maybe that's Tyus Jones, maybe that's Dillon Brooks. And then Jaren Jackson will kind of be there defending the guy in the corner or whatever. He'll be the low man who's rotating in to protect the rim from the weak side most of the time, all right? The Suns live in the mid-range, right? So the Grizzlies' defense is basically set up to allow good mid-range, open mid-range shots if the opponent is going to take them. The Suns love to take that shot, right? It's the same reason the Suns have had so much success against the Jazz the past 2 years before this when the Jazz had Gobert. They can punish teams who defend that way. So I think Chris Paul, if he's in attack mode, I think you could really see him benefit and maybe have a better scoring night than we expect. This isn't so much of a Suns advantage. It's just that the Suns don't have to worry about it so much because Memphis doesn't have a great bench either, right? We know the Suns bench, especially with guys out, Campaign's still out, whatever, they don't have a great bench, but neither does Memphis. And so the Suns don't have to worry about that too terribly much either. This game will probably be decided in the starting lineup. And then last but not least, if Okogie does play, I think this is a game where you really could see him make an impact because it would allow him to guard Ja, which I think is a very, very good matchup for Okogie. And then maybe Mikal can guard Tyus Jones or he can guard Dillon Brooks, and then that allows him to not have to be so super involved and focused defensively. Maybe he gets to score a little bit more with Book out. I think that's a game where Okogie can play a lot of minutes and be impactful is probably one where the Suns play better, do better, maybe win the game. You throw it back to the offensive glass point that I made and this defense against Ja. I think Okogie, this is a game for him. All right, so that's a few good advantages for the Suns, but obviously without Booker, it's going to be tough. So that's where we start with Memphis, their advantages. And these aren't just for tomorrow's game, but obviously a lot changes if Book does play on Tuesday's game. We don't know. First up for Memphis, they're going to be able to suffocate this Suns offense. I mentioned the pick and roll stuff, but that's going to be, unless Chris Paul just decides I'm getting in my time machine on a Friday night and I'm going to, come score 40 on you like it's, whatever that 2011 series against the Lakers. Unless it's like that, the pick and roll, the ways the Suns can punish the Grizzlies in the pick and roll is not going to overwhelm and change the whole game. On the whole, the Grizzlies defense, they're number one in defense in the month of December, and they have answers for everything. They have Dillon Brooks as a perimeter stopper. Tyus Jones is pretty good, getting, his hands in the cookie jar, generating turnovers, staying with his man. He's not a slouch by any means. They just bring all these guys off the bench who can defend all different types of players, whether that's Brandon Clark or it's John Conchar, even David Roddy's been pretty solid there. Obviously, Jaren Jackson is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And then Steven Adams. This is another advantage Memphis has. Obviously, I haven't even said DeAndre Ayton's name really so far. He's been on a roll. He's been very good since Thanksgiving. He's somebody you would expect to pick things up with Booker out. He did that last game, and he's been doing it consistently. But I think Steven Adams is a great person to guard DeAndre Ayton. He's strong. He's not going to foul too terribly much. He's going to be steady on the glass for the most part, and it's just going to be hard for DeAndre Ayton to get some of those quick duck-ins or whatever, especially considering Memphis isn't going to switch quite as much as other teams do. So Adams is going to be a neutralizer against DeAndre Ayton. That's going to be a much tougher matchup than it was, Daniel Gafford against Washington, for instance, right? And then last but not least, the obvious thing everybody knows about the Grizzlies is they're going to come at you when it comes to the transition game. They're going to get downhill. Ja's going to be a pain in the butt. Dillon Brooks is going to be a pain in the butt. Tyus Jones, they know how to run. They leak out, all these things. And the Suns' transition defense has been a problem at times. Their defense overall has been a problem at times. But their communication in transition, their contesting. If you think back to that Boston and Dallas game back-to-back that 1 week, a couple weeks ago, where they just had no clue what they were doing in transition defense, the Suns can get burned that way, and that's the number one thing the Grizzlies are going to do to you. So if it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a game where the Grizzlies got up early by running, by turning defense into offense and all that, and the Suns just don't have enough offense to come back. they don't have enough answers offensively with no Devin Booker to put up enough points to come back against the Grizzlies and make it a game. So as much as I think the home court advantage could help the Suns, I probably have the Grizzlies winning this one. I think something like 115 to 105, 110 to 100, I think is where we could see this game end, and a pretty resounding victory for the Grizzlies. I hate saying that, but this Suns team is so battered right now without Booker. It's just really tough. But that's what they play for, right? We'll see after this. I'll be back on Monday, folks, to recap that game as well as Christmas night against the Denver Nuggets. 2 awesome matchups. I know you will be tuning in. I will give you all of my thoughts on Monday. Until then, have a Merry Christmas for everybody who celebrates. To everyone who does not celebrate, enjoy the time off, and I will talk to you all on Monday.